You don't have to travel far here on YouTube or in the real world to start encountering bad teachers. There's a lot of ways to win the title of bad teacher, but figuring out what makes up a bad teacher also helps us deduce what makes up a good teacher. And that can be pretty valuable information to know if you are planning on becoming a music instructor yourself, or if you're just a student trying to assess the value of the lessons that you're taking. The culture and profession of music education is fascinating to me, and it's a very important aspect of my life. There's a lot of people in my personal life I could discuss these topics with, but there's one person in particular whom I really wanted to speak with. That person is Levi Clay. He has a channel here on YouTube filled with guitar lessons, podcasts, and the occasional rage time video where he rails against a company or individual engaged in some shady business practices. Now, having learned from several of his videos in the past, I was pretty well aware of his efficiency and capabilities as a player and as an instructor. I also knew that he wouldn't filter out any of his opinions on these topics, so I really thought he would be a perfect person to talk to about this kind of thing. Now, I expected to just have a quick conversation with him, but it easily evolved into a nearly 2-hour conversation. So what I've done is taken that entire video, that entire interview, and I've given it to Levi to post on his channel. There's links below in the description so you can watch that. In this video, what I've done though is trim out just 4 little segments of important topics that I think might be educational to you if you are an instructor or plan on being one, or like I said, just as a student. The first thing we started talking about is experiences of extremely discouraging authority figures in our musical careers, and how we ended up both having this unlikely path towards becoming music instructors. We also began to touch on a topic that became way more prominent throughout our longer interview, the idea of gatekeeping. Who is allowed to teach and who isn't allowed to teach? Levi, I wanted to talk to you specifically about teaching and the philosophy of teaching. And just to kind of set the stage here, I want to talk about like what I think about when I think of bad teaching. When I was in 6th grade, I didn't play music. I did all sorts of geeky stuff. I did like magic tricks and like yo-yos and origami. Like, yeah, I was just, I was not cool.
I did those things too.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, juggling. I was into juggling. And then, so 6th grade, all my family is into music. My dad, my mom, my brother. And here I am thinking like, okay, I just don't have the music gene, right? And I'm in 6th grade music and they give me the bell. They give you one bell, like here, you're the note C, you're the note E. Now play the note C when the note C comes up on the page. And like, I was confused. I couldn't read the music. I didn't understand what was happening. I hated it. I hated my life. It was like, okay, I'm clearly not a musician. I will never be a musician. There's 2 kinds of people on this planet, the people that have it and the people that don't, and I'm clearly one of the people that don't. And obviously, that wasn't the case. But my question is, how could you have a music teacher so bad at teaching music that they couldn't pull out whatever tiny bit of musical aptitude I had at 6th grade? So to me, that's like a shining demonstration of what, to me, a bad teacher is at its fundamental level.
Yeah, 100%, yeah.
So do you have anything in your life that's like even remotely close to that, where you've seen just a level of horrible, teaching on that level, where it's like they've defied the whole point of it?
Well, I mean, before like really getting into any of this, I think it's this is such a difficult conversation, right? Because it almost feels like we're gatekeeping who can and can't teach, or who should and shouldn't teach.
And exactly, I want to talk about
which
that.
is something I have talked about in the past. But I very much like yourself, I think it is an important subject to talk about, because we are talking ultimately about how to better everybody in our industry. I don't think anybody is incapable of teaching. You just have to take it very seriously, because much like yourself, my experience was nowhere near as bad as that. But what I have always found is music education, at least over here in the UK, is very formal when it happens, and therefore the people that tend to do music lessons are, in schools at least, are all of classical music backgrounds, and that also tends to mean that they come from families with money. And I didn't come from a family with money in any way, shape or form. I came from the complete opposite. So when I decided to pick up music, which was around, what would I have been, maybe 14 or 15, when we go in to take our GCSEs or choose our subjects for GCSE, when I said to our music teacher, I think I've decided I'm going to do music, he was absolutely flabbergasted by this and spent a good couple of weeks trying to talk me out of that and saying this probably isn't for you. And I can't understand why that is. Is it a bad teacher? Is it a you don't belong thing? Is it a lack of confidence in your ability to help the person grow as a musician? Because spoilers, I think of just about everybody that was in my class at that time, I don't know if any of them are still working in the industry. But here I still am all these years later.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. As far as gatekeeping and who can be a teacher and who can't be a teacher, I think that's a really important topic because what you're saying is that so much of the music lessons out there are formalized and academic, and I would say the same thing goes out here. But I got extremely lucky. When I was in high school, I went to a music store. I had long hair. I was working at like a fast food joint, and I went to this music shop and I said, "Hey, can I teach guitar lessons here?" And they said, "Well, currently our current guitar teacher, Jason or Jerry or whatever." Oh, he's a drunk and he comes in every Monday, or he cancels every Monday because he's drinking all the weekend. So yeah, you can start this Wednesday. And like I'm in high school. I couldn't even sight read. Okay, I literally just walked in and it's like, oh, I think I'll just try teaching guitar because I teach like 3 of my friends how to play Metallica songs. So I was thrown into the pit. I was thrown into that stew completely unprepared. I feel guilty for those initial students I had. I had like a 4th grade girl. I'm trying to teach her Metallica riffs. Not a good way to teach a young student. I had no idea what I was doing. But over that 2 years of being thrown into that pit, I developed my own teaching style that I'm really happy with. I'm happy with the results that I see, reflected back at me. And if we only reserved teaching to people with degrees, it's like I feel like that would have completely limited my ability to ever do this. So I don't ever want to say that there's a certain requirement academically that makes a good teacher. I think the requirements for a good teacher are something a little bit more simple. Like they make good students. They make a good teacher is somebody who makes a student who's enthusiastic and motivated and curious. That to me is the hallmark of a good teacher. Sure. Not if their student gets passes all the tests. Not if their student is the fastest or the most technical. Yep. But those are the things that mean a lot more to me as a teacher.
Yeah, totally. You're talking about like inspiring passion in people.
Absolutely.
And you referenced that Jason or Jerry or whatever his name was. You don't even remember his name, and that says everything that needs to be said because he didn't take the job seriously. And much like yourself, I sort of fell into teaching without really paying much attention to why I'd found my way there. I started teaching when I was 16 or 17, but I was certainly very young. When I was in high school, my chemistry teacher, she knew that she was my personal tutor as well. So she knew me very well. She knew that I was more than capable of explaining myself. I communicate well, so she essentially used me as a babysitter. One night a week after school, she said, "Well, my kids want to learn to play guitar, and I need to stay late this evening. So could you possibly teach them both?" And then she said, "I'll pay you." And at that moment, I'm like, "Oh, this sounds fantastic." And initially, I look back and I look at those students and maybe feel a little bit guilty, but you very quickly start to realize if teaching is for you and if you start to become passionate about the art of education and communication and putting ideas across and helping and inspiring young people. So yeah, I can relate. I totally relate.
We also really tried to get into some of the specifics, the characteristics of really what does make up a bad instructor versus a good instructor, and sharing our general philosophies on good teaching versus bad teaching. Some pretty important topics like how much does a student's performance depend on their instructor, and how much of a role should profit motivate a music instructor. Here's one of the things I wanted to ask you. Okay, we kind of got over this idea of what makes a good teacher, and I think we're on the same page with that. We're developing musicality. I totally agree with that. To me, it's also inspiring motivation and inspiration. To me, if my student isn't practicing, that's 90% my fault. If they're not practicing, it's because I didn't find a way to motivate them. I didn't find a way to just build that passion in there. And you can't do that with every student. Some students are just not motivatable, and that's a very small minority. But for the most part, I've learned that if they're not practicing, that's my problem. That's not their problem so much. So I think we're kind of on the same page as far as instilling musicality and inspiring people. But what do you think specifically makes a bad teacher? In your experiences, other than discouraging? I mean, it sounds like your one experience is somebody discouraging a goal of yours. You had this goal, and they just immediately dismiss it and discourage it. Can you think of any other elements that you would associate with just bad teachers?
Oh, easily. So it's I was thinking whilst you were saying that, a sign of someone, a good teacher, is everything you talked about there is the sign of a good teacher. You not only care about your students' goals, but your performance as a teacher. The fact that you would even assess whether or not your students practicing, and that would have any impact on whether on your care in the world, it says good teacher, right? So to me, a bad teacher is the opposite of that. A bad teacher is somebody that, we all know these guys, right? They play in bands. The bands don't make any money, so they make a little bit of money on the side teaching guitar. And every single student that they have is just a blank face. Yeah. They don't remember who the person is when they turn up for their lessons. There's absolutely no sense of where the students' path is going, the things that they want to learn, and the pathway that they need to take in order to do that. The idea of lesson objectives and goals that we'll be achieving in this lesson, the reasons we do those. Mm-hmm. And where you would be going from those in our next lesson. None of that is present with a bad teacher. A bad teacher is really there to take up an hour of your time for as little effort as possible and get some money out of the situation. And it's
very succinctly put. That is pretty much what I think. That's a definition of a bad teacher right there. You're bringing up to mind another teacher I had the pleasure of working with, who was I won't mention his name because I actually remember this guy's name. He would. I just remember always walking past that lesson studio, and seeing a student with that blank face, like they had just been, electroshock therapy, and there's just nothing left. And I'm telling you that it was book 1, Hal Leonard, book 1, and then Hal Leonard, Guitar Method book 2, and then Hal Leonard, Guitar Method book 3, and then the jazz book, and then it was just like here is how you learn guitar, and I couldn't fathom how you could think you've got a 10-year-old girl here that likes Taylor Swift, and you've got a 29-year-old guy that likes Led Zeppelin, and you're teaching them the exact same way.
Yeah.
How could you possibly think that would be an efficient way? Or you just not care? Are you just there to take up somebody's time? And I would think that some of it is just that. Some people are just lazy. They just, clock in, clock out. But there is that other level of people that really are greedy with it. I mean, this is why I really admire what you do so much on your channel specifically. I love your absolute, fearlessness with calling out people that are just doing scummy business practices and exploiting people that are, either vulnerable. I mean, that's the thing I really like the most. The thing that inspires me the most about what you do is that level of your work, that fearlessness.
So I was going to go down that path now in response to what you were saying, and I'm not going to name names, but here's the other thing, the sign of a bad teacher. It's somebody that's primary goal is the making of their money rather than their students, right? And that can come about from many. There are many signs of someone that does that. If someone sets up guitar teaching in your local area and they significantly try and undercut you in terms of cost, that's a sign of a bad teacher, because all they care about is getting that money in rather than the product they can deliver. All of your teachers in your area should be able to charge the same amount, because you should all be offering a decent level of service. You should all be offering the same service. But the biggest sign for me, and the thing that really made my YouTube thing blow up, was finding all of these teachers that their modus operandi is not necessarily to be the best teachers, but to go out there and discredit the methods of other teachers. So instilling this sense of, they're essentially trying to use the internet in order to steal you away from your current teacher by planting this seed that what your teacher is teaching you is incorrect. And I think that's the most parasitic approach to teaching, because I appreciate that when I'm saying things like that, it might appear that I'm doing the same to guys like that, but I'm not talking about their methods of teaching. I'm talking about their business ethics. I don't see teachers like yourself, because you have a YouTube channel and there is a limited period of time in the world. People have a limited period of time in life, so time that they spend watching your videos is time they could be spent watching my videos. But I don't see people like you or local teachers or anything like that as competition. In fact, I actually think we should be working more together as a community, because great teachers don't contradict each other. Great teachers have things that are in line with each other. I have a network of teachers. Probably one of my best friends is Martin Miller, and he's a great guitar player, great teacher, signature Ibanez guitar, everything you need to know about the guy. That is his pedigree, and he sends students my way because he knows that when his students go on to me, I'm not going to contradict the things that he's been working on them with. I'm going to add gravitas to the things that he has taught them. And likewise, if there's something that I'm not 100% confident on, and there are, like the subject of modern metal, polyrhythms, I understand it, but it's certainly not something that I would want to teach and pretend to be an authority on. I know the areas that I'm an authority on. I'm confident to pass these people on to other people on the scene, because ultimately it's not about my bank balance. It's all about the student getting what they need out of the situation. So the bad teacher is the one that's trying to keep hold of you for as long as possible. A good teacher makes themselves redundant as fast as possible.
Okay, so one of my general teaching philosophies, you hit it 100%. It's a self-defeating philosophy, is that my job as a guitar teacher is to make it that you never need a guitar lesson again, that you can do everything on your own, that you never need a teacher, and you can go into any route or realm or aspect of music, and you can pursue it with the knowledge that I've given you. And then you might say, okay, well, I need a new teacher because I'm not quite prepared in jazz, but, at least Jake got me prepared where I can at least parse jazz on my own and understand what I need on it. Okay, now I want to learn counterpoint. And, maybe I'm not that good at it, so maybe I'll take some lessons, but at least I understand the basics of it. Now I can pursue it without feeling too daunted. That's to me is like the whole job, is to get people free immediately. Get them so they don't have to pay for lessons. And it's like, that is a self-defeating business model. Yeah. It's a horrible business model, but it's really, really, really freaking rewarding as a teacher. When you think that way and when you work that way, and then the results come back after the years, it's one of the most rewarding things I can think of. Now, Levi ended up throwing a pretty controversial question to me, controversial in the sense of music instruction, and I was really surprised on his reaction to my answer, because I had always felt a little insecure about some of my teaching methods, one in particular being about teaching sight reading and reading sheet music.
Let me throw a controversial question at you then.
Sure.
So where do you stand on the subject of teaching reading?
Teaching sight reading?
Yes.
I don't teach sight reading to most students unless they are under a certain age. If they are like in middle school, and if they're like 6th grade or 5th grade, and I don't even take most students. I had like 8 years or over is what I used to start teaching at. That's what I eventually changed, because the fingers are too small underneath that. They didn't have the attention span. And I did have some 8-year-old students that actually worked out really good. So it was kind of a case-by-case basis. But if they're at that age, I feel like I'd be a failure of a teacher to not teach them basic sight reading, because they're going to go in a band. Their parents are going to put them in band. Parents are going to put them in give them a clarinet. And I want them to be like, oh, I take lessons with Jake, and I know the C. I want them to have that benefit as a music student with me, that I am helping enrich their lives outside of that. But I only go through like the very, very, very basics of sight reading so they can develop the skills to interpret it. I do not teach any of my adult students how to sight read unless they specifically ask for it, because 99% of the music that I am confronted with as a guitar player in the year 2020 is not notated in sheet music.
Yep.
So why should we spend hours and hours and weeks and hundreds of dollars learning a skill that is only practical or applicable less than 1% of your time as a musician?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That's my thought.
So I'm not going to say bad guitar teacher, but it's that same principle of, if you have a guitar teacher that seems to be teaching you things because these things take a long time, that's probably a warning sign. Sight reading is definitely a skill, or reading skills. I always say there's a difference between sight reading and reading skills.
Right.
But for me, it's so easy to teach, sight reading to a student, and it will take years. And that's great if you want to make some money. But if you're being honest with yourself as a teacher, I think that we can all acknowledge that every single minute that you spend sight reading could be better spent somewhere else. Every single minute could be better spent training your ear. So I was transcribing some Paul Gilbert songs with a student today. None of his harder instrumental stuff. I'm talking like the Spaceship One era pop rock stuff.
Okay.
Looking at songs like Mr. Spock is a great tune. Some lovely chord changes in there. And now, with more musical experience, I listen to it and I go, okay, it's Paul Gilbert, but it's not. This is basically a Beatles song. That's what's going on here, because my ear understands that now. Now I'm at that stage where I'm working on this with students, and I'm like, isn't it really cool that he played like a secondary dominant chord there, but it's in first inversion, and the student sort of is starting to pick these up. We initially call them money chords or ear twisters, anything that happens that you go, oh, what was that? And I think every second that you spend learning to sight read and is a second less on something like that, being able to hear something and go, oh, that was a minor 7 flat 5 chord, where is that? Let me find that. Because I should have known this stuff. I learned to play almost all of that album when it came out in 2006 or a little bit before then. But the nuance of it, the things that actually matter, they were way over my head.
Right.
The harmony, the songs, the strumming,
100% agreement. I mean, I'm not saying it's not a valuable skill, but for what we're doing,
Yes.
I mean, let's face it, we're on the guitar. We're not on the piano. You're not going to be downloading all your stuff. I mean, like, it's a different world, and to treat all the instruments the same is completely pointless. To say, this is the way they taught piano, 100 years ago, this is the way you need to teach guitar in the year 2020 is complete nonsense. I don't subscribe to it. And I did subscribe to it when I started teaching because I thought that's what I'm supposed to do. And fortunately, I learned in this world, and many people of our age, and we're similar age. I'm 33. You've got about I'm quite older than you. You're about 26, right?
No, I'm 32.
32.
31.
I thought you were younger.
31.
31.
Maybe.
So maybe I was watching one of your older videos when you mentioned your age or something like that. But our generation, I feel, has got that a little bit better figured out.
Yeah, I'm not anti-reading. Let me be clear on that. Like, some of my students have to learn to read because, funnily enough, a lot of students come to me because they want to transcribe. That's what the skill that they want to learn from me. And when I say to them, well, let's be realistic here. If you want to listen to something and write it down, you damn sure better be able to see something written down and know what that's going to sound like. Like, those two things are very closely linked. So there are certain people that I'll absolutely be working on reading with, but again, we're looking for bad teachers. A bad teacher is somebody that gives you a skill that you don't need because it means that they can drag out those lessons. And
the worst part is they gave you that skill in lieu of more practical skills. They could have been working like what you were saying, training your ear in those cases. I just feel like it's one of the greatest things about the generational shift is, I think, this idea of like, okay, just because things weren't that way, they used to be that way doesn't mean we need to continue doing it that way. And I do see a lot more of that in teaching. I do see a lot more of that in, the YouTube environment. And hopefully it catches on because, I'm sure that your videos, my videos, I mean, people are paying attention to these. I'm sure that actual teachers are seeing these things. When I say actual teachers, I mean academic teachers. Eventually the tide has to change. And I think it's going to change because it's effective, because people are realizing, wow, people are really learning more from these YouTube videos on guitar than they are from college classes on music theory.
And more importantly, today Rick Beato is giving a speech at Berkeley. I know that's the type of thing that Adam Neely does. They reach huge amounts of people. You reach huge amounts of people. I reach a lot of people. But let's say, for argument's sake, that only 2 people have ever seen my videos, and the same with you. That's still more people than the idea started with. You've still spread it out more. Exactly. And those 2 people, if they can tell 2 more people, inspire 2 more people, and stop this kind of super old-fashioned way, uninspired way of teaching, then things are only ever going to change. And fortunately, it's more than 2 people. We're spreading our ideas to tens of thousands of people, hundreds in your case.
Absolutely. We kind of got off on a tangent on outdated principles of teaching and things that just didn't make sense in the way that they're commonly taught. And it really just kind of became a gripe fest of how a lousy music theory can be sometimes. Most importantly, though, the point that we were getting at is that just because something was taught a certain way in the past does not mean it should continue to be taught that way in the future. There is a balance between respecting the old ways of teaching things and also embracing a new and more practical and effective way of teaching that. But this is the kind of stuff that's going to make a lot of traditionalists upset. Okay, so you asked me a controversial question on the music staff, and this gets into a territory which I'm legitimately afraid to talk about, all right? Because I get eaten up for this, even just privately amongst my friends and my students. The circle of fifths is not a topic I spend a single moment on with my students, because for one reason alone. Yes, it's cool. It's filled with cool relationships. Yes, you can study it all day long. You can see these cool things, and it can help you figure this out, and you can help you figure that. But I have never once been benefited by my circle of fifths. I have never written a better song because of my circle of fifths. I have never written a cooler chord change because of my circle of fifths. I have never thought, what if I consult my circle of fifths? How will this? It's never been practical to me as somebody who isn't, I don't know. I just don't get it. I mean, it's helpful to find the key signature. Yeah, if you're not familiar with key signatures, but I'm sure you're at the point where the key signatures are ingrained. You're not counting through the you know how many sharps are in D. You know how many flats are in F. Like, this is stuff you just know because you transcribe all the time. So why am I a bad teacher? Honest answer here. Am I a bad teacher for never teaching the circle of fifths unless they ask about it?
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love this question. And it actually makes me wonder why we're even having this conversation. Because generally speaking, I think the reason conversations like this work is because you have people with differing ideas. It's no good when you're essentially talking to a mirror, because I'm in complete agreement with you. I'm in 100% agreement with you.
Yes!
And it's, you know what, that could maybe be out of complete ignorance. I would say I'm pretty well versed in music and music theory, and there are lots of subjects that exist objectively. The circle of fifths exists. but I am yet to sit down with any of my peers and have them explain to me a reason why it matters, a reason like the benefit that I get out of it. It just hasn't been a thing for me, unless you're doing classical harmony, which is something that I haven't done. I've not done Baroque counterpoint since high school. Like, it's not been relevant.
I've never had to, and I won't learn it unless I have to. Really.
Yeah. I'll throw one back at you then. Okay. Solfege.
Ah, okay. Well, oh boy, do I teach it? No, but do I admire it and value it? Yeah. I mean, I have taught it in certain instances because I think movable do is a great concept. I think, understand if you're talking about the actual rules of solfege, like do, re, ra, and so I don't teach that specifically. I do teach the idea of movable do just using intervals. Like I want people to be able to audiate and vocalize all of the 12 intervals. That to me is extremely important with those students that at least get to that point. But do I teach it in the traditional sense? No, I just tell them that that's what it is.
Yes.
This is the way it's supposed to happen. What we're going to do is 1, 2, 3, flat 3. That's what we're going to do. We don't need to learn.
We're mirroring again. Because, like the classic solfege system, it's that, I'm not going to say it's a bad system or that it's something that you shouldn't teach, but it's that same mentality of the people that teach this are very dogmatic about it. And that I do find issue with, because my method of doing things is, what is do? What is re? It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. It could be fish, chips, pie. It doesn't matter, right? So why not do it with something that actually means something? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like that, to me, makes sense. And when I ask that question to people in that position, they can't give me an answer other than tradition.
Yeah.
And I don't like that.
That's not a good enough answer.
I think as teachers, so here's a really interesting one. Have you read Ted Green's, one of my favorite books is his single note soloing books?
I have not.
Okay, great books. And in it, honestly, some of the best books that you'll look at on lines and vocabulary.
I'm going to actually say it for me one more time so I can...
Ted Green's single note soloing.
Okay.
People always talk about his chord chemistry book, but I think that's garbage. But single note soloing, the 1 and 2, are some of the best books. In there, he just throws out the boys' club. Like, he teaches Mixolydian, right? Teaches dominant chords, teaches voicings for 9s, 11s, 13s, and everything in between, right? And then it comes to what you play over there, and at no point in this chunk of text does he use the word Mixolydian. He says the dominant scale. And I love it. I love it because I know what Mixolydian means, right?
Right.
But in order for that to mean something, I have to have the Rosetta Stone of knowledge, if you know what I mean. I have to know what Mixolydian means and translate it into something that means something to me. Whereas when Ted says the dominant scale, that scale that spells out a dominant chord, that to me is just like so progressive. And it's not a new book, this has been around for decades. That's what I'm really looking for in a good teacher, someone that is willing to buck tradition and do something a little bit more progressive, because what they're saying objectively makes a lot more sense. I don't think of my scales in terms of linear things anymore. To me, like the dominant, when I say to a student, what does the Mixolydian scale sound like? And they play me this linear thing, I'm like, no, but what does it sound like? What I'm really looking for them to do is play a dominant 13 chord, because that's that scale presented in an intervallic structure. That tells me what it sounds like. So when you say Lydian to me, I just see major 13 sharp 11. Like in my mind, that's what that means. And any scale, I've just got a translated chord form of it, because then immediately I know what this sounds like. Lockerian natural 2, cool. That minor major 9 sound, beautiful. Yeah, got it.
All in all, I had a really great and enjoyable conversation with Levi. It helped me really kind of refine my own thoughts on some of these topics as well. So thanks to Levi Clay for helping me out with this video. I hope you enjoy this one. It's a little different from this channel, and I will be coming back soon with my modal series as soon as I can. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you soon.